Alright guys, we're back staring at my engine bay, and in this video we are going to talk about my recommended supporting mods for your higher horsepower build. And this is primarily going to be geared towards people that are upgrading their turbos, and I get a lot of questions about that, and so I'm just going to use this video to provide all of my recommendations to you, and hopefully that can give you guys a little insight so that you can plan out your build accordingly. Now, I know a lot of the opinions that I'm going to share in this video will be different from what most people say and a lot of assumptions that people have, but I'm going to provide data and really explain why I think the way that I do and why I recommend what I do, so hopefully at least this will give you the information you need to make that decision for yourself. Now, first things first, I want to clarify that simply putting a bigger turbo on your car does not mean that you need a specific supporting mod. So I get a lot of questions from people asking, if I put a DOCRace kit on my car, do I need port injection? Or if I put, a big boost kit on my car, do I need to build my engine? And those two things are not directly linked. The only thing that's important is how far you're going to be pushing your car and how you plan on using it. Everything on your car is going to have a limitation, but any competent tuner can tune your car to keep it within the safe limits of your entire system. So whatever that weakest link in your system is, you can safely tune around it so that the car gets as much performance as possible while still being reliable for your specific setup. And at this point, I've gone through a lot of those steps. I've ran my big turbo kit with just a TU pump. I've ran my big turbo kit with the stock engine, stock transmission. I ran full E85 on just the TU pump. So I've tested a lot of different things just to demonstrate that with a proper tune, you can make almost any setup work. So hopefully this just clears that up, because a lot of people assume that a specific turbo or a specific type of fuel will require you to make certain upgrades, when in reality, your tuner can safely make any setup work. It's really about what your goals are. Once you figure out your goals, then you can plan out the rest of your build accordingly. So stop and think about what that goal is. Do you have a certain amount of horsepower in mind? Do you want to hit a certain time at, the drag strip? Do you want to beat your friend that just got a Hellcat or whatever that is? Figure out what that goal is, and then you can begin putting your build list together. Now, the first thing that most people focus on is fueling. And of course, again, there are a lot of different ways to make a setup work and a lot of different fuels you can run. So my first question is always, what do you plan on running? Pump gas, ethanol, or methanol? If you're only going to be running pump gas, then all you need is a TU high pressure fuel pump. And the good news is, if you have like a Supra or a G20 like M340i or M440i, your car already comes with the TU pump. So you can simply slap the turbo on your car, get it tuned, and go enjoy your car. If you have a Gen 1 B58 like me, then I definitely recommend getting a TU pump to get the most out of it, and that will allow you to push the turbo to the octane limits. Now, you're going to hit those octane limits before you run out of fuel, so that's why you don't need a Dorch Stage 2 or port injection, because having additional fueling headroom is not going to get past the octane limits of running pump gas. Now, if you're like me and you have ethanol stations available, that's a really easy way to get past those octane limits. So if you're going to run on E85, you can definitely take advantage of a Dorch Stage 2, and I highly recommend sticking with that as long as possible. You can make upwards of 650 to 700 horsepower with it on an ethanol mix, and closer to around 600 horsepower on full E85. And the good news is you can tune it just like a completely stock system. So you don't have any extra controllers or injectors or fuel lines and things that you have to worry about that come with port injection. So if that 650 to 700 horsepower target is good enough for you, knowing that you can stay within, the engine limits and the transmission limits without having to really build your car, sticking with the Dorch Stage 2 and just having an upgraded fuel pump will give you a lot of power and really optimize your system. Now, if you want to make more than that, or you really want to push your car on full E85, then that's a great time to get port injection. You can add a spacer plate in between your intake manifolds so that you have virtually unlimited headroom. There are plenty of people making over 1,000 wheel horsepower with port injection. So you just get, 6,000 cc injectors and turn it up until you hit your goals then. Now, if you don't have pump E85 available, a meth injection kit is a great way to get past the octane limits of just running on pump gas. So you can get a meth injection kit and run a meth injection spacer with 6 nozzles, and it'll be just like running fuel port injection. You'll have additional meth spraying directly into the cylinder head so that you can increase your octane and make even more power. And again, your only limitation there is the size of your nozzles and how much fuel you need. So kind of upgrade those accordingly until you reach your goals. Okay, so now we'll talk about the mating components. And starting over here, the first part going into your turbo is the intake. Now, for me, I always recommend the stock intake. It works great, it's completely enclosed, and it pulls air directly from the front grill area, so you don't really have to worry about IAT issues and things like that. There are multiple cars running over 700 wheel horsepower with the stock airbox, so it does not seem to be an actual limitation or choke point when you're trying to push higher horsepower levels. Now, keep in mind, there are plenty of benefits with upgrading your intake. You can get quicker spool, you can reduce your wastegate duty cycle, and just simply the turbo doesn't have to work as hard to hit the same power levels. But it just doesn't seem to be a bottleneck to where I would say that you have to upgrade your intake if you want to safely make more power. So if you want, you can save your money there and invest it in other things. Now that is only really for hybrid turbos. Obviously, if you have a turbo like mine, it won't fit the stock intake, and those kits will come with an aftermarket intake in most cases. So you can use the intake that comes with your kit if you're getting a full frame turbo, or some of the kits like Big Boost come with an adapter so that it can mate up to a couple different aftermarket intakes on the market. Now next we're going to go into the charge pipe. And again, this is something that doesn't really need to be upgraded. Stock works fine, it holds a lot of boost and makes really good power. I have a full video on this if you want to understand everything about why you don't necessarily need to upgrade your charge pipe. So you can check that out if you want, but suffice it to say, there are only really two cases where I recommend upgrading it. First of all, if you're adding a port injection spacer, that's actually going to push your intake manifold out. So you're going to need to get an aftermarket charge pipe because you need a longer piece of silicone so that you can stretch the charge pipe out and still keep everything clamped on. So that position of the throttle body will change, and so getting a longer charge pipe will allow you to mate up to that. Also, if you want to use the charge pipe for any other auxiliary fueling like water injection, nitrous, whatever, a lot of them have bungs like this so that you can easily add an additional port. You can use that for a boost source, for a low pressure pump, or a lot of different things. So if you need that extra bung, it's a lot safer to get an aftermarket aluminum pipe instead of trying to tap into your plastic pipe. Now, after the charge pipe, we circle back to the intake manifold. And of course, this is our intercooler as well. So there are two different things that we're concerned about here. The primary one, of course, is cooling off our IATs, and everything that I've done in my personal testing has shown that the stock intercooler is extremely efficient, and you can make good power with that stock intercooler because it's an air to water intercooler. It takes a really long time for the water to get, heat soaked and cause any sort of issues. So in my opinion, again, if you're pushing 650 to 700, the actual intercooler is efficient enough to hold that power. However, the only downside of this is that it is made of plastic. And even though our plastic charge pipe can hold a lot of boost, the intake manifold cannot. And we've seen a lot of people crack these intake manifolds pushing higher boost levels like 30 plus on a hybrid turbo. Now, in my case, I'm only hitting, 28 to 29 PSI on my turbo kit, and it's been holding fine so far. But I do feel like I'm kind of approaching that edge of where, the intake manifold might become less reliable. So typically I tell people try to keep it below 30 PSI, running higher ethanol mixes so that you can run lower boost and more timing to make the same power will also help keep it together, so that you're not just throwing a bunch of boost pressure at the car. But in general, you'll want to upgrade that to an aftermarket unit if you're shooting for really high boost. Now next we go into the actual engine, and this is something, again, people ask me, do I need to build my engine if I'm getting a bigger turbo, etc. And none of that matters. What actually matters is how much power and torque you are making. I have a whole separate video that explains the limits of the stock engine, so feel free to check that out if you want more information. But typically around 650 to 700 wheel horsepower is where you know that this engine is going to be really reliable. Pushing 750 to 800 is really approaching the edge, and above that, you're kind of on borrowed time. Some people are making it work, but I still recommend building the engine just until we actually see more people doing that successfully. And then lastly, we have the exhaust. So on my car, of course, with the big turbo kit, again, it comes with its own downpipe. If your turbo doesn't come with a downpipe, like maybe you got a hybrid turbo, I highly recommend getting a catless downpipe. You can make a catted downpipe work, but it begins to become a choke point when you're pushing higher boost levels. I know some people have blown out their cats or melted their cats. So especially if you're shooting for like 550, 600 plus horsepower, I typically recommend upgrading to a catless pipe. And like always, some people have made it work, but just for me and peace of mind, based on the failures that I have seen, I recommend upgrading it instead of, trying to push it into a dangerous level. And luckily for us, our stock exhaust is really not restrictive at all. It has a straight through design, so all of the resonators and mufflers that you see actually don't have any baffling or anything that's blocking the airflow inside of the piping. It simply has material that's built into the casings to suppress sound, but it doesn't do anything to block or restrict airflow, which is really nice. I know some people have upgraded to aftermarket exhausts with larger diameter piping and trying to reduce the bends and things like that. And it's just like your intake, you know, it can only help. It'll increase your airflow, reduce your restrictions, and maybe reduce your wastegate duty cycle and things like that. But it has yet to be shown to be an actual bottleneck in any of my testing. Now, lastly, we're going to talk about drivetrain components. So coming out of your engine, the first thing is your transmission. Again, lucky for you, I've already made a video about the limitations of the transmission, so check that out if you want more information. But for all of you ZF8 guys, typically around 650 foot-pounds is the limit where you'll need to upgrade your trans. So if you're not shooting for that much power, or if you limit your power in your tune, you can still make plenty of power and plenty of torque with the car without upgrading your transmission. Even on my car, I am specifically limiting torque because my car has the manual transmission and the clutch that I have seems to be limited to around 600 foot-pounds before it slips. So I limit torque in my tune to 600 foot-pounds just to make sure that I'm not overwhelming the clutch and everything else is happy. So again, work with your tuner, help them understand what your goals are, and they can make it work. After that, we have the drive shaft that's underneath the car, and that's a really big point of contention because a lot of people have gone through like 5 drive shafts, and there are people that haven't gone through any like me. And the big thing that I notice is most people that go through drive shafts are running really aggressive tires and going to the track where it's prepped really well, and when they launch their car, all of that shock is pushed directly onto the drive shaft. And it might last 10 times and fail on the 11th. It might last 100 times and fail on the 101st. But that's really what's causing it. I've even seen people with the stock turbo twist a drive shaft because they were running a really aggressive tire on a really sticky surface. And so it's not just about how much power you're making. I myself, I don't run like slicks or anything. I don't do drag racing. So with how much power I'm making, even though the car spins sometimes and things like that, I'm okay with it because it's not sending all of that shock to the drive shaft. I would rather lose a bit of rubber on my tire than break a drive shaft and be left stranded. So keep that in mind. Again, it's mostly about how you use it and where you're driving your car. And in order to keep your drive shaft safe, you're going to want to, not run a super aggressive tire on a super aggressive surface. Now, there have not been any off-the-shelf options that I've found. Most people send their drive shaft off to a shop to get it upgraded if that's what they're looking to do, or they send the measurements to a shop so that a new drive shaft can be made. So just keep that in mind, check with people local to you, see what shops they use, and they should be able to hook you up with somebody that can build a drive shaft for you. And then lastly, we're going to talk about wheels and tires. So on my car, I have a 200 Treadwear Hankook RS4. It worked great for me, and I'm going to do another video more about wheel and tires, how to pick them out and sizing and things like that. But I do recommend upgrading your tires, especially in the summer. Running a proper summer tire will help give your car a lot more control, and even if it spins and things like that, you're not going to completely lose it. So it's just something that I do for peace of mind, and it improves the performance of everything. It gives you more traction in accelerating, it gives you more traction in braking, and reduces how much time it takes for your car to slow down, and all of those things. So upgrading tires, I think, is a really great option. Not something you 100% have to do, but it does help keep you on the road. This was one of my crappy opinions, but I still have the stock brakes. I did buy upgraded pads just in case because, if the car started feeling sketchy or something, I could upgrade them if I needed to, but I haven't really felt the need. And again, just my crappy opinion, but my car doing 150 miles an hour on the stock turbo isn't going to stop any faster than 150 miles an hour with an upgraded turbo. It's the same car, it's the same weight. My upgraded tires do a great job of improving my braking performance alone, and I still have enough brakes to completely lock up the tires if I wanted to. So the big benefit for me in upgrading my brakes is when I do back road runs and I do a lot of braking back to back to back and it generates a lot of heat, it reduces the chance of brake fade. But I have yet to feel like the car couldn't stop because I upgraded my turbo, So your mileage may vary. At the end of the day, do what you're comfortable with. If the car does feel like it's taking too long to stop and you want to upgrade your brakes, go for it. But I mean, especially if you have the OEM upgraded brakes, like the track pack brakes, they perform really well in my testing. I've done a lot of runs to 160, 170 plus, and the car stops fine. So yeah, those are my thoughts and recommendations. Sorry this was pretty long-winded, but I hope this gives you a little bit of insight for why I think the way that I think and why I recommend what I recommend. And of course, you know, make the decision for yourself. Pay attention to your car, pay attention to what you want it to do and anywhere it's lacking, and just upgrade it accordingly. Build your car based on your specific goals and how things are working out for you. Nothing works better than you evaluating your setup and making decisions for yourself. So thanks for watching. I hope this video helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.